Okay, so this is for my 140 English 101 class since we're not meeting because of the president's inauguration. So I think I'm just going to talk for about 10 minutes here just to kind of wrap up a little bit how the end of the novel contributes to some of the questions that we've been discussing, okay, over the past week and a half. Okay, so in the last part of the novel, we learn more about why the group of characters who are going to rob the powwow, setting the trap, so to speak, are wounded. And we also find out at the end of the novel how the central family is reunited, with the powwow, again using that metaphor, in this instance, for them acting as a home. So, first, I'll discuss how the last part of the novel provides more evidence for our paper topics. In terms of the topic in which I ask to explain how two or three characters are damaged or wounded, and how knowledge of their culture or heritage helps ease or ameliorate their pain, we're introduced, as we mentioned, I think last class, to three more characters, right, that you might want to include if you want to. Octavio, we learn of his tragic losses of his father, his brother, and his mother, in part because of his uncle Sixto's actions. Sixto sees them as having inherited what he calls a dark thing. At the bottom of 181, he says, "We got this old thing that hurts real fucking bad, makes you mean. That's what you got. That's what your grandpa had in him. Be a man," she told me, "keep it to yourself." Okay, this is when Sixto's doing that sort of medicine ceremony ritual with Octavio. And Sixto tries to use what he calls ceremony to heal. Octavio's grandmother, Josephina or Fina, also tries to lift what she sees as a curse on his life through a native ritual by making him a medicine box. She says on pages 184 at the bottom to 185, she says, "Some of us got this feeling stuck inside all the time, like we've done something wrong, like we ourselves are something wrong, like who we are deep inside, that thing we want to name but can't. It's like we're afraid we'll be punished for it. So we hide, we drink alcohol because it helps us feel like we can be ourselves and not be afraid. But we punish ourselves with it." And she goes on from there. Okay. We also learn about Thomas Frank, who is sort of, I don't know, introduced, I think, a little late in the novel, to be honest. But he works at the Indian Center as a custodian. We know that his father was from off the reservation. His mother was white and an evangelical Christian. And so he feels himself to be half and half. At the bottom of 216, for instance, he says that he carries a chip because of this. "The chip you carry has to do with being born and raised in Oakland. A concrete chip, a slab really heavy on one side, the half side, the side not white. As for your mom's side, as for your whiteness, there's too much and not enough there to know what to do with it. You're from a people who took and took and took and took, and from a people taken. You are both and neither." Okay. And he has eczema, which he calls a wound. And his father is an alcoholic, which is a disease that he inherits, what Thomas Frank inherits from his father. His family eventually falls apart, and he says that for drumming for him, once he discovers it, he's always been a drummer from when he's been in the womb, is what he calls a prayer on page 225. Finally, there's Blue, who is Jackie's kid with Harvey after she was raped on Alcatraz. Blue, whose name is Crystal, originally is adopted by white people, and she lives in a very affluent neighborhood in California. And she says that she feels white, even though she was always treated like a brown person. Her job at the Indian Center made her feel like she belonged somewhere. and she gets a job in Oklahoma associated with the Cheyenne tribe. She joins in peyote ceremonies, and she meets a guy named Paul. They get married, she says, the TP way. And he turns out to be highly physically he hurts her, beats her. And as we know, after she returns to the Indian Center in Oakland, she is finally also reunited with her family. In terms of another paper topic, the third one is, what does Orange want to communicate to his readers about the modern Native experience? It seems that what part of what the novel is about is what it means to be Indian, what it means to be Native. Orange says on page 10, what we are is what our ancestors did, how they survived. We are the memories we don't remember, which live in us, which we feel. He also emphasizes, I think throughout, another statement that he makes in the prologue on page 11, being Indian has never been about returning to the land. The land is everywhere and nowhere. It's also about why Indians, natives, are wounded. All have different kinds of wounds, right? Broken families, poverty, etc. And they have different ways that they connect with their native culture through dance, drumming, video, working at the Indian Center, ceremonies, and rituals. Orange seems to emphasize the idea that most natives are urban now, with a very small percentage living on reservations. And while this has provided opportunities, it's also a risk to their culture being erased. And this kind of leads to the next topic that you might write on. Why is storytelling so important? Why are Native stories important? And so part of this, I think kind of a third theme in the novel, is how Indians can be healed. Okay. As we've discussed the last couple of class periods, Orange finds importance in modern stories to counter stereotypes like the Indian head test pattern. Also, he finds modern stories sort of more relevant, right, for modern natives and whites than what they call, or what he calls, an unspeakable history. And so what he does is he tells the novel from several points of view. It's called a polyphonic novel, Polyphonic, polyphonic. What it means to be Indian or Native is different for different characters, right? For the broken or severely wounded, like Octavio and his gang, the culture is something that they take advantage of. They're basically carrying on the legacy of what whites have done to natives from the start. Some of these characters still take some comfort in native culture, again, as we see when Fina and Sixto try to use rituals to lift the curses and the darkness that they feel are on their family. For the family that's central to the novel, that is Opal, Jackie, their mother Vicky, the grandkids Orville, Lonnie, Luther, and Harvey and Edwin and Blue, their culture provides some sense of sanctuary and belonging. And of course, again, it's participation, right, in their culture, in the powwow, that sort of brings everybody home, not without danger, of course. Finally, Orange frames a book with Tony Loneman's experience. He repeats the there idea that we have at the beginning. Remember, there's no there. Gertrude Stein's quote about Oakland, meaning her childhood home is not there, but it also refers to there's no there in terms of where Indians or natives belong. There's no land, right, left. And so it's not about the land. There is also that Radiohead song, right? Just because you feel it doesn't mean it's there. And that, I think, relates to the ways in which some of the characters in the novel really question, right? What does it mean to be Native? I don't know anything about Native culture or history. Is it really there inside me? And at the very end of the novel, on page 289, this is as poor Tony is lying there dying after he's kind of saved, or, tried to save the day or a little bit. And it refers to, at the top of 289, a game that Tony would play with his grandmother when he was little. Right? Bubbles would be on her face, and he'd say, "I know they're there. The bubbles are there." And Tony is finally redeemed in the end. He says he looks at the beginning, he's the drome, right? And he's becomes in the end like a transformer or an Autobot who sacrifices himself to save other people. And the book ends with the sound of birds singing, which I think we're supposed to, in some way, be comforted by Tony's actions. He seems to have a very peaceful end. And in the first chapter of the book, he said that he wanted to be recognized for an action someday, and that's exactly what happens at the end. Okay, I hope that helped a little bit. Thanks for listening.